Welcome to FYI, the podcast where we have brief career chats with various professionals. My name is Diana Ramirez.
And my name is Sarah Shamasha. We are first-year experienced counselors, aka FYE. Hint, hint to our podcast name. Our vision with this podcast is to share the career journeys of alumni who started at the community college.
We are starting in 3,
2,
1.
Woohoo!
Yay, how exciting, Sarah. We are here. It is our first podcast. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good.
Awesome. So let's ask the big question that our lovely audience is wondering: who are we and what are we doing? We really wanted to start this first podcast to give you a little bit about ourselves and the journey that we're going to be taking you on. As we mentioned, we're both counselors that work with the first year experience program here at Grossmont College. I'm Diana. In addition to counseling, I also teach a counseling course on campus. Sarah, tell us a little bit about you.
Yes, I'm Sarah. I'm also a counselor. As counselors, we meet with our first-year students to help them navigate the college process to accomplish their academic and their career goals. What we found working with our students when we work on their career goals, that they sometimes find challenges in what career pathway they choose to take. So we're hoping that through this podcast, we can share light into the journey of exploring careers, all while having some fun conversations. This is why we decided to play on the word FYI, which is our podcast name.
I just love our podcast name, by the way. I just feel like it really connects to the type of work that we do, the insight that we're doing. So I really hope that the audience can kind of see that. Today, we also wanted to talk about what the future looks like. What's the journey that we're going to be taking together? And so although we love to share our stories, you're not just going to be hearing from us. We're going to invite guests from different career fields. But really, the heart of this podcast is to learn from community college alumni. I'm a product of community college myself, and so that to me is so important. So we're going to be bringing community college alumni to have those fun conversations of how they found their careers and their journey, the challenges, the highlights, all that good stuff. So we know that you're super busy. You probably have a lot going on. So we're going to make sure that we make this podcast brief. Our goal is to get the stories out there to the world. So please share our podcast with someone you know, whether they're students, educators, or anyone else.
So I guess we can go right ahead and get started with our stories. We're going to start with Diana's story. Feel free to start whatever you like, and we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, so I think I already give a little hint into my story, but I am a community college alumni, proud product of coming from a community college. I am from the LA area, so we're recording this live in San Diego, but I'm from the LA area, and so I grew up there. And really my journey, when I think about this, especially with the work that we're doing, right, Sarah, we work with students that are in their first year to college, and so I think of myself. And where was I? Long ago. Maybe not too long, but long ago. And so I think about that, right? And so I was coming from high school. I didn't have a specific goal of what I wanted to get into. I thought, I was working at a fast food place at that time, and I was really lucky because one of my friends, she was mentioning that she was getting a job on campus. I'm like, say what? No, I should say less right now. Say less. So sign me up. And so I really wanted to switch my journey and go into finding a job elsewhere. So that was really my motive. I didn't have this grand goal of what I wanted to do. So I started going through community college through specific programs on campus. Shout out to the EOPS programs and also the Puente program. So I think that's how I started my community college journey.
How did you decide what major to choose when you first started?
I already knew. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah,
like,
right.
I knew what I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I knew it. I had a little piece of paper. I had a diary. No, I'm just kidding. It really took a journey. I knew going in that I wanted to do something with helping others. Mm-hmm. Helping others is so big, though, right? It could be a doctor. It could be a nurse. It could be so many things. But for me, what was sticking to me was working with probation, like a probation officer type of work. But I was kind of thinking that, but not really sure. Mm-hmm. So, I did some work with the counselors, and there was like 3 areas that I was looking at. I was looking at nutrition. I've always been really interested in learning about health. Yeah. Then I was also interested in psychology because that's the major that I knew about. And then I was like, something about probation, so like criminal justice, that's what came to mind. And so with a little bit of research, I was like, some things of nutrition that I like, but maybe not me so much. Mm-hmm. So then I just went with psychology. So that's what I started with, psychology.
Awesome.
But I didn't.
What did you end up with that?
Yeah, I didn't end there. So I took a psychology course, right? So I started thinking, this is going to be my route. And I loved a lot of the psychology. And this is not, I think you're a psychology major. I know we're going to get into your story. But
we'll get there.
You're a psych major, right? Yeah. So no shade to the psych majors. But I was really interested in the part of learning of human behavior in like groups, right? Yes. So looking at, social problems, family units, things of that. And so when I got to the science part, that wasn't what I was really interested in. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, how can I capture this part of the program or major, if you will? And I found that through sociology. So then when I found sociology, that's where it just was a little solidified for me. I went through some other, looking at other things, but I do think that was just like the pivotal moment of changing for my major.
That's cool. I'm curious, was there, aside from classes, was there anything else on campus that like you were involved in or outside of campus that kind of helped you with that direction, whether it's choosing your major or career, like within college?
Yeah, there's a lot of things, but I would say 2 things that come to mind, right? We're making a brief chat, so we don't want to be here for 30 minutes. Yeah. But one of the things was that in my social class, the professor brought a person that worked for a domestic violence agency. Got it. And I was like, whoa, you do what? You work with families and how, and in what ways? That's really amazing. And at the end of class, she provided internship opportunities. Cool. And I was like, yeah, sign me up. I thought the whole class was going to go run. Yeah. And so I was like getting my stuff ready, and I was the only one like, hey, I'm interested in this. And I got an internship.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. At first, it was kind of like doing paperwork, stuff like that. And then they actually provided some training. So I got this like certification. Yeah. And then, so I moved away a little bit from that paperwork to started running like art therapy. Not I want to say art therapy, but like art workshops for kids while the moms were getting services and things like that.
That's awesome.
It was a lot of fun. It was, so I think that was one of the, solidifying moments where I was like, I'm on the right track here, right? This brings me joy. And I think the other part of what your question was support through my counselors. That counseling space was that. So I got to share my experiences, my, like the internships, my major, and my Puente counselor. I'm going to give a shout out to him, Armando Soto. He was just one of the many, but he was one that really helped navigate me through that process.
Just again, before we kind of get to the end of your career journey, I'm curious about the transfer process. How is that for you, since we might have a lot of community college students listening in?
Because of the support, it wasn't the technical part of applying, like the applications, wasn't that intense. I think I do remember the personal insight questions. That was a little rough because I had to dig deeper. I thought, I'm going to write, because I was applying to both UCs and Cal State. So it's like, I'm going to write this one time and then we'll be good to go. No, I had edits on edits on edits. So I do remember that piece was, very time consuming. But for me, what comes for me in the transfer process is when applying to schools like UCLA, UC Berkeley, it's more of that belief in myself that I could be there, right? So I don't think I was fully there. I think it was just more like, just do it, get through it. just put your name out there, right?
Yeah.
And then when I found out after, the schools that I got into, I ended up after going to UC Berkeley. That moment wasn't for me like you see now, like on TikTok, where, and I think it's so beautiful where families come together and you see that. I was literally by myself, like, oh, okay, let's see where I got into, And so because it still was that belief that I wasn't sure if I was going to get into those schools. But yeah, I think that's what I would say. I just kind of really went with the flow, wasn't really expecting too much. So I didn't have that like very hard on myself through that journey. I was just, I'm going to do it and see where I kind of land.
Yeah, that's good. And you also had the support, which was awesome.
Yeah, and I think that's why it wasn't that intense, because of that support. It was just more dealing with like what my thoughts were about me being a transfer student. Do I see myself in these institutions?
Yeah. All right. And then I guess you were doing sociology. How did you end up here as a counselor?
Ooh, okay.
Kind of end your story there.
Yeah. So that's a long journey, and I think we'll maybe hear pieces of it. So I know with our guests, we'll, insert a little bit of our stuff and, all of that kind of thing. But to give you the cliff notes or, whatever
summary,
whatever folks, where do they go now? To give you the short AI version? I don't know. What is the new way to say things?
That's so true. Yes.
I don't know. You know what I mean? To give you the summary of it. So I was looking at working with like foster youth. That was kind of maybe like social work, something around that lens. And I felt sociology gave me that broad experience. And through my journey, I got some experience working, through like not a social worker, but, in resident homes, group homes, things like that. And I really found that journey of helping, at that time residents, but helping people into the pathway into college was really my calling. And so that's why I never thought I was going to go for my master's like at all. But I found out that in order to do that work, I needed my master's. And so I think that's what brought me into the work that I do. I think for me it was very full circle to be able to provide or be in a space where someone made that impact in my life and to do something similar. And I actually, fun fact, started my work as a counselor in the same community college that I went to.
That's so awesome.
It was so cool to go back to it. I worked with one of my ELPS counselors too. I was like, you're a colleague now. No, like a little like weird, but even then in going back, it was just very beautiful to see that those connections weren't just like here are your classes and like go. They were deeper. Yes, they were deeper to like years later that, they were still really encouraging. They were still with the same vibe, so I think that just kind of affirmed that was the path for me.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, no, thank you for those questions, counselor. So talk to me a little bit about yours. So we know that you're part of the FYE program, counselor. We know you didn't go to community college, but your journey is still important, right?
Yes.
And your story is still important. So what did you do? Let's start there. Where did you go for your undergrad? How was that?
So I went to SDSU. It kind of, choosing my major, I have to give you some background context kind of story, because choosing my major was like purposeful, but not really at the same time. I was born in Iraq and I came here as a refugee. So in that process, learning English, I watched a lot of American TV shows, including House and Grey's Anatomy. So I had this idea of like, doctors are so cool. So being a refugee, I'm sure this is an experience a lot of people share, but like typically your parents don't really know a lot about college experience, how to get to college. A lot of them just like, you know what, we came here, you have to go to college. It's important, but you have to figure out yourself. So in that process of trying to figure it out, I just kind of applied. I did whatever I was told or heard from other students, what they were doing to kind of navigate it. And then I applied to SDSU. I was like, oh, like might as well become a doctor. It's something I thought was cool. So naturally I chose biology because I'm like, that's what everybody else is doing. So I started at SDSU as a biology major, but I was very confused, unsure how to navigate college or what classes or even how to get to med school. And then I also minored in psychology because that was something I was interested in from high school. I took a psychology class and I loved it. And I was like, maybe this is something I can do. So from there on, I kind of just tried to navigate as much as I could with whatever I could get involved in. A lot of that process, was made easier by me working. Surprisingly, I worked a lot on campus. I think I've mentioned this in our conversations, but now everybody knows. At some point, I worked like 3 jobs on campus. So with every single job, I gained new knowledge, whether it's on leadership or like pre-health planning or people just being involved in different clubs. And that's how I kind of got started. And then things as obviously changed since I'm a counselor now and not a doctor. So that's kind of how it started. So in that process, I basically tried everything to see if that was really something that I wanted to do, because I was kind of hesitant and scared. As a refugee or like an immigrant, you're like, you don't want to disappoint your parents, and you also like want to do the right thing, and it's just a lot of these things combined. So I was like, let me make sure that if I do like go for it, I can get in, but also at the same time try to figure out if this is really what I want to do. So I volunteered at multiple hospitals. I joined clubs that like went to TJ and like did volunteer work.
Were the clubs like pre-med?
Yeah, pre-med related clubs, yeah. I think the one at SDSU, now everybody's going to know about it, it's called MedLife. So they typically go to Mexico to like volunteer. I also like would translate for different, because I know Arabic and Chaldean, so then I would translate for different hospitals / clinics. I did research on fruit flies to get a research experience. So I did a lot of things, and I think in that process, I was like, I really don't see myself like going to med school. I really don't see myself going through that educational route or career path. So I was really lost. And in that process, I was like, what do I do? I'm almost about to graduate. So someone advised me to double major and stay an extra year. So guess what? I double majored and I became a bio-psych major. And I stayed an extra year, and it took me 5 years to graduate. But even then, that extra year didn't really help. So if you're double majoring just to figure out your life, it's probably not a good idea.
I have a question as you're talking, because I think a lot of times, you know, students have that fear of like that decision, and when they set something like bio, right? And then to change that is a scary process, like you said, right? You wanted to make sure. How was that for you to accept the change? And also because you talked about your family, right? How was that process for you?
It's really challenging because, especially when, I guess, relating to myself as a refugee / immigrant, you want your parents to be happy and like proud of you. When you set up those expectations for them, like, oh, I'm going to be a doctor, then they have that idea too. So I think for me, it took a long time to accept it myself, and like seeing myself successful in other things and kind of just communicating that with my parents. Like, although you won't see me this way, I will still be successful. And at some point, like, they were disappointed, not disappointed greatly to where they treated me differently, but like just the idea of like, initially they wanted me to be a doctor, and then I decided to change my mind. So they had that year of disappointment. But then once I figured out what I wanted to do, which was like to get my master's, be a counselor, kind of go in that field, now everyone they see, they're like, my daughter is a counselor. My daughter is teaching a class. My daughter is doing this. So now like they're beaming with like, you know, happiness. So it was a period where I'm like, I was scared, but I also knew that I can do my best, because I always went like, I'm the type of person that like, even if I don't know, I'll try to go for it type of thing. Even I can't see like the end of the tunnel, but like, let's try anyways. So I knew that I was going to be successful in that sense, whatever success kind of means to you. To me, it was like finding a job that I like, and like I'm kind of supporting myself, you know, that stability. So knowing that I can do that kind of gave me that little bit of comfort, like it's possible. So that kind of the route that I kind of went towards.
Yeah, that's so amazing. I think you hit on so many points that like our students have to, you know, go through the journey, and hopefully within hearing your story, right, that can enlighten, like, I'm not kind of alone in this process. And I really love that you brought in like the family, right, because that is really impactful for a lot of students when they have to make that decision as well.
Sometimes I get a lot of students where like they're here and like, oh, my parents told me to start, and we get those situations a lot. Sometimes when you're at 18, you're like, I don't know if I want to go to college, but I'm just being told to come here. So we can relate with you, because sometimes when we started, we didn't know either. It's a tough decision to make, like what to do, if you should go to college, if you should not go to college, if you should pursue something else, especially now with social media where everyone's like, you could do all these other things. So like we understand that, and we're trying to help you navigate that when we meet with you or through this podcast. So hopefully it gives you a little glimpse on what people's stories are navigating education, and like where they're at and how you can get there.
Yeah, and I think even though our stories are very different, right? We met as, FYE counselors now, but there's so much parallels that I could see. For me, as a first generation college student, my family, is from Mexico, and their journey in education, here in the U.S., they didn't have much of education, but they always had that value, right? That work ethic, and that kind of translated into, well, I'm bringing this into my education setting and in my job. So I'm definitely excited to learn more about your story. Your experience, and hopefully you all really enjoyed and got a little glimpse into just the start of who we are and the types of conversations that we're going to have. As we mentioned, we would love to sit here and talk more and get more into depth with you. I think we were already a little bit in a row, but we want to be mindful, right? The gems that we share, and each week we're going to be coming with different kind of stories in different fields, right?
Yes, different fields for sure. So every person can get a taste of what's out there.
I guess we can just close out with thanking the audience for being here, listening to our stories. We hope that you come back for our next podcast and let us know what your thoughts are. And if you're one of our students, come and chat with us about the podcast. Let us know what you thought.
Alrighty. See you later.
Bye.
This has been the FYI podcast with the counselors of Grossmont College, brought to you by Liliana Lomelí of Griffin Radio.